We're on the Bible Forum. It's Sunday night, February 18, 2018. Have you been paying any attention to what's going on in Florida? We heard this week about the at least 7 complaints to the FBI regarding Nikolas Cruz. You know Nikolas Cruz? He's the guy that shot up that high school in Florida. We've seen the video of him in his backyard turning to fire a pistol over his shoulder just before entering the back door, calmly as you please. On Friday, Broward County, Florida Sheriff Scott Israel revealed that his office received calls for 2 years about Nikolas Cruz before he opened fire on the Florida high school. According to the New York Times, Israel said his office received about 20 calls in total about the reportedly troubled teen. Israel's announcement came as the FBI admitted it failed to properly notify a Miami field office of a warning from someone close to Cruz. This prompted Florida Governor Rick Scott to call on Friday for FBI Director Christopher Wray's resignation. Christopher Wray has been on the job for about 6 months. He's not even sure where the bathroom is yet. Chill. That was for political consumption. 17 innocent people are dead, and acknowledging a mistake isn't going to cut it, the governor said. Nikolas Cruz was a former student of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, where the shooting occurred. He was expelled for disciplinary reasons. 24 hours before the Valentine's Day shooting rampage, another potentially horrific mass shooting was thwarted. This in Everett, Washington. Police arrested Joshua O'Connor, 18 years of age, after he made, quote, upcoming and credible threats, end of quote, to murder students at Acres Alternative High School with a rifle and homemade explosive devices. He wrote in his journal, I'm preparing myself for the school shooting. I can't wait. My aim has gotten much more accurate. I can't wait to walk into that class and blow all those blankety blanks away. Nikolas Cruz posted on Facebook. Not that overt, but similar concepts. O'Connor's grandmother, who had read O'Connor's disturbing journal entries. How dare she read that? That's private. You can't read a child's journal. Children are supposed to have privacy. They're children. They have no privacy. None. They're in training. You have to know what they're doing. You have to know what they're thinking. Where did we get this idea that kids are adults and they have all the rights and privilege? They got nothing. They're allowed to be stupid. After that, everything is up to the parents. It's called training. But you see, we just raised them now. We stopped training them decades ago. The difference here is somebody was unfamiliar with our non-judgmental philosophy. Yeah, a grandmother frightened of this child. A grandmother frightened by this child just couldn't keep still. The basic law in our system is that it allows for acceptance and tolerance and lack of discrimination of all things immoral. We are critical of every single thing that is just and right and godly. But we cannot be critical of anything that is the opposite of all of that. Being critical is now a cultural sin. Therefore, almost any antisocial behavior pattern must be understood, tolerated, accepted. Go for it, sweetheart. 16 children, a teacher, are dead, with more on the critical list. That's our brave, new, tolerant world. Have you been paying any attention to what's going on in Argentina? Think about people cutting their hair and selling it in order to buy food. These people are suffering worse than we did here during the Great Depression. But worse than that is Venezuela. Inflation in Venezuela is all off the chart. Venezuela is a socialist state. Its currency, the bolivar, has lost 99.9% of its value, according to the Economist. If you're lucky enough to find a dozen eggs in Venezuela, it's going to cost you $150. And there are no jobs. The unemployment rate is a staggering 25%. That's just as high as it was during the Great Depression here in the United States. And sadly, it's only expected to rise even higher. If things couldn't be worse in this failing socialist state, and believe me, they all fail, now parents are abandoning their children in orphanages. Venezuela is now governed by a constituent assembly composed of close allies of President Nicolas Maduro. The opposition-controlled Congress has been sidelined. The highest court is stacked with Maduro loyalists, and the National Guard has been ordered to take a hard line on protests. Hear about that on NBC News? CNN? Anywhere. Fox News. Nobody's talking about it. It's amazing. Do you have children? Are your children going to school? We're having a hard time educating our kids today. But teaching children is not nuclear science. It just, today people think it is. A new peer-reviewed meta-analysis of 328 studies performed over the past 50 years finds what is called strong positive results for a style of teaching known as direct instruction. Have you ever heard of that? You have to be older than 50 years of age to have heard of it. You have to be more than 70 years of age to have experienced it in the public schools. Direct instruction is what made this country great. And it was thrown out decades ago. Who did that? John Dewey, a psychiatrist. Direct instruction was found to be effective across all races, all gender, all ages, all levels of family income, and in all subjects. In various studies, it was found, quote, all the estimated effects were positive and all were statistically significant, except results related to non-academic effects such as personality and feelings. So what did we do? The psychiatrist is now the father of modern American education, and he created a world where personality and feelings are protected. And to do that, direct instruction was abandoned. Because all it does is prepare children for a productive life. It doesn't prepare them for the emotional conflict or the emotional evolution. And our brave new world needs these things. Our children's intellectual, psychological, marital, social development is secondary. I know. But the research is there. Experts tell us that what followed this experiment is, in a word, bunk. The field of education research is well known for producing especially shoddy, ideologically driven, and therefore untrustworthy work. The social sciences replication crisis is particularly acute in education. We don't hear stuff like that, but read it. It's there. That doesn't mean there's no good education research. It simply means that tacking on the word research to some finding is not good enough to enhance its credibility. It means people need to examine the research themselves or find trustworthy sources of analysis before they start believing what the experts are trying to tell us and what the gullible media is parroting. For example, it's very popular to believe that people have dominant learning styles such as visual, kinesthetic, and auditory. But cognitive scientists find no such thing. The man who came up with this theory is named Howard Gardner, and he's made a huge career out of it. Continues to be treated as a leader in his field, but academic reviewers say paying attention to him is a complete waste of time. Not to mention taxpayer dollars for consultants, books, training, and all the rest of it. Feelings and fads trump knowledge in our modern American education system. So what is direct instruction anyway? Well, it's how children have been taught since the days of Adam and Eve until the 1940s, 1950s. Over 5,000 years of history and experience were thrown out by so-called experts. Why? Well, in Dewey's words, and he was the father of it, in order to create a progressive culture. Now, direct instruction is described as clear teaching. It refers to a curricula that systematically teaches discrete concepts step by step toward a clearly established economic goal. Students are then required to master foundational concepts before they can move on. You don't move on if you can't read. For example, this kind of teaching lends itself to subjects that can be broken down into concrete steps and systematically taught. Things like reading, math, grammar, spelling. So what's the problem with it? The problem is cognitive psychologists don't like it, and they have developed our new curricula. John Dewey was a psychiatrist. Alex Tabarrok at Marginal Revolution tells us how it works. First, a skill such as reading or subtraction is broken down into simple components. Then a method to teach that component is developed and tested in the lab and in the field. The method must then be explicitly codified and when used must be free of vagueness so students are reliably led to the correct interpretation. Materials, methods, scripts are then produced for teachers to follow very closely. Students are put together by ability, not grouped by age, and no student advances before mastery. The lessons are fast-paced, and feedback and assessment are quick. So what's the problem? Well, the problems are many, not the least of which is not every child learns this way. Look at our dropout rate. Look at the huge number of children who never graduate, never progress. Look at the number of students we have in high school that cannot read above a fourth grade level. In my day, we had a 3-tier program. We had slow students. We had average students. We had smart kids. That's what we called them. They had another name for them. That disappeared in the late 1950s as the new approach, as they called it, was integrated in. Now, every child is in the same class. Some get it, others don't. Those who do not are eventually passed along. They may stay back a year or two, but eventually they've got to be passed along for social reasons. And this continues until they reach about 17 or 18 years of age when they just drop out. Nicholas Cruz was such a child. Did you know that a high school diploma is awarded to children who finish 9th grade? They can pass a test. They get a diploma. It's got another name. It's called a certificate, but it works like a diploma. Now, in 9th grade, they have reached only minimal proficiency, but it gets them a job. Only today, these kids are not looking for jobs. And those who do are going to be stuck in jobs paying just over welfare levels, or they're going to get busy and get educated and trained. That 9th grade diploma is called an equivalency. Our culture is now reflecting this whole philosophy as it graduates less children. As young people avoid meaningful jobs in favor of drugs, sex, music, partying, or whatever fills their daily life, while they still live at home until they're in their 30s and sometimes 40s. A useless waste and entirely unnecessary. Violence, drugs, sex, and just pure paganism is driving children out of the state educational system into private or home schools. Look for more of this in the future. The internet and the many companies marketing curriculum for parents will drive the next generation of quality students. Are you saying my child can't get a good education in a public school? I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's not a public school any longer. Because the public has no say. And then I'm going to ask you, what constitutes a good education? And in the end, I'm going to say, no, that's just not the point. The point is our school system now belongs to the state and it's run by psychologists, not educators. Children are being more conditioned than they are educated. I was involved in starting a school in 1979. We encourage parents of children as young as 4.5 years of age to put their children in kindergarten. We guaranteed them, they were paying for this, we guaranteed them that unless their child had a learning disability, when Christmas came, they could read anything the parents put in front of them. And you laugh. We did it. No, they had no idea what they were reading. But they could read the words. We've got high school kids that can't do that. Struggle, don't know what words are, can't sound them out, can't figure out what that 5-syllable word is, how to say it. Why? Because they're doing sight reading, not phonetics. I learned on sight reading. I didn't know it. If you're old, you did too. See, spot, run. Remember that? Dick and Jane. Sight reading. We weren't learning the sounds of these various vowels and consonants, these letters. We were learning to look at that word and realize that says spot, and always know that says spot. And most of us did just fine. But then most of us were not from broken families. Most of us were not from parents who did drugs and damaged their DNA. Most of us were in families that were intact, mom and dad. We didn't have computers, phones. We didn't even have television till the middle 50s. And then it was only a little bit. We watched the news and we watched maybe one program. That television wasn't on as the center of our life. We went out and played. And we were expected to know what life was about. Look at the average college graduate today. That person is politically and morally liberal, meaning anything goes. They're open for anything. Nothing's wrong except objective values and standards, meaning God is out. Self is in. Now, that's not my definition of success. It's not my definition of education. A little bit later on in the program, we're going to look and learn how to destroy a society. Stay with us.